Today I want to try something a little bit different because I know I make longer videos, usually around 20 minutes long. Sometimes they're a little bit longer. And I want to make sure that people get all the information I'm trying to put out there. And one of the common things I see is people either complain that the video is too long, or they say, hey, why don't you talk about this, or why don't you talk about that? When in reality, I did already talk about it, but people might not have saw it or noticed it because they didn't see the whole video and they kind of just stopped watching it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to put timestamps down below of the different topics that I'm going to cover in this video. I'm going to try to make an effort to continue doing that. So that way, if you came for this part of the video, maybe there's another part that you might like as well, and you can just skip forward to that and just hear about the things that you really are interested in. But as you notice when you clicked on this video is that we're going to first talk about layoffs, because this has been a huge problem throughout 2024 and starting into 2025. There's been different sectors of the economy that have been hit harder than others. Tech workers have basically been hit harder than everybody else. In 2024, there was more than 150,000 job cuts from companies like Amazon, Google, Tesla, Microsoft, places like that. And I think Tesla has actually been the biggest offender when it comes to layoffs. They have laid off more people than any tech company over the past year. And then more recently this year, you're seeing a lot of government workers lose their job due to the DOGE department. They've been letting a lot of people go. And even though some of these firings and layoffs are being challenged in court, for now, a lot of these people are still unemployed, and that means they're not making money and they're not contributing that much to the economy. Right now we have ongoing unemployment claims at their highest level since November of 2021. So that's not really moving in the right direction. Although I think we can all agree that a lot of the government jobs that are being cut probably needed to be cut. But it goes far beyond that. But one of the sectors of the economy besides the federal government this year in 2025 that's getting hit the hardest with layoffs is retail. According to consulting firm Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, they came out with a report that shows us that U.S. retailers eliminated more than 64,000 jobs during the first 4 months of 2025, the second most of any industry, and it's a 296% increase from the same 4-month span at the beginning of 2024, guys. Almost 300% more job losses in retail. Now, if anybody saw my video the other day about the end of self-checkout at a lot of these different stores, this shouldn't come as a huge shocker either, because you have all these stores that have been basically trying to push customers to do the job of the associates with this self-checkout nonsense. And now that they're trying to reverse all this stuff, they only have a couple of checkouts open and making people wait forever to actually get checked out. That's not a great experience. So who wants to deal with that? Time is short for everybody. Pretty much anything that can be bought in store can be bought online. So with this behavior, they're just pushing more and more people into buying things online. And one of the largest reasons for these layoffs in the retail industry is retail bankruptcies, because there have been several retail bankruptcies announced in 2025. One of the largest ones was Joann Fabrics, which left almost 20,000 people without a job. Another one that I covered earlier this year was Party City. They filed for bankruptcy twice, and that left 16,000 people out of a job. Another one was Big Lots. They filed for bankruptcy. They're kind of restructuring their business and they're still around, but they still had to let go of 1,000 people. And even retailers who are not in bankruptcy are still having to lay people off. Starbucks just laid off 1,100 corporate employees back in February. Then you have things like corporate restructuring going on from CVS and Walmart, JCPenney, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Estee Lauder. And if anybody out there from the retail industry is watching this video, I can tell you 100% from my own personal experience, besides the self-checkout nonsense, one thing that I hate about going to a retail store today in 2025 that's so much different than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago, is customer service is non-existent. And I can actually speak to this because my very first job I ever had when I was 16 years old was in retail. And people would come up to me all the time when I was working in the store and ask me different questions about where things are, or how does this work, or what do you think about this item, or whatever. And that was actually one of the parts I liked about the job most, was being able to help people find something, being able to help them make a decision on what to buy, different things like that. You know, I can't speak for everybody that used to work there, but I kind of enjoyed the customer service aspect of it when it came to helping customers. Now, fast forward all these years later, you walk into any retail store, good luck even finding somebody who works there. And if you do, the chances that they're going to be friendly and help you find what you need and be able to answer your questions are practically nil. If you do find somebody who knows where something's at, it's just kind of a short, bitter answer like, yeah, it's in aisle 5. What? That's how you're going to answer me? Like, I used to actually say, yeah, sure, I know exactly where it is. Follow me. You know, I would walk the customer over to the item and show them exactly where it is. And sometimes they would have extra questions on which one to buy. And I would be able to help them with that too. Now, I quit that retail job. That was my very first job after a year of working there because there was just no money in it. I was making minimum wage, and it was making like $5.25 an hour back then, something like that. So I was always looking for a better opportunity, but the job itself didn't suck. But when you combine these poor attitudes and poor customer service in retail with customers expected to check out their own merchandise and do the work that the associates once did, it's no wonder that people don't want to go to these stores. I hardly ever go to the store, guys. You combine those problems with like the traffic of living in Miami, forget it. The only way I'm going to the store is if I'm right there. If I just happen to be in the area and I need something right now. But with how fast Amazon Prime can deliver these days, there's almost nothing that's needed faster than when they can deliver it, you know? So if these retailers want to stop filing for bankruptcy and want to stop laying people off and want to start expanding again, then I think they should really be looking at their business model and what they can bring to the table versus an online retailer. Because if they're just competing on price alone, they are going to lose this game. Another big layoff that was announced this week, thanks Richard for sending this story to me, was from the auditing company PwC. They're going to be reducing its US workforce by about 1,500 positions. The reason for this, because they're like an auditing/accounting firm, is because unusually low turnover. So basically, not enough people are leaving the job, so they're forcing people to leave. Now, on the one hand, it sounds like this has been a good place to work if a lot of people haven't wanted to leave, if people have been sticking around for so long that they have to let people go. But most of the people who are getting fired right now are people who just joined the company, but some people who are getting let go were actually up for a promotion, and they just got the notice this week that, oh yeah, by the way, we're letting you go. I mean, how much does that suck, guys? You think you're getting a promotion. That reminds me of the Office Space movie, you know, like you got Samir and Michael going in there to interview with the Bobs thinking they're going to get a promotion and Peter's going to get fired, and it ends up the other way around. And last year, this company PwC also had to lay off 1,800 people. So it's just another series of layoffs, guys. And this is the trend you're seeing with so many different companies right now. Like a lot of them trimmed the fat already last year, but now come 2025, they're realizing it's not enough. Businesses has slowed down so much for almost everybody that they have to cut the fat even more. And I really want to talk about the tariff situation because that is also impacting these decisions as well, which we're going to get to a little bit later on in this video. But while we're still talking about the job market, JD sent me this story about some of the different reasons why there's a huge surge right now in temp jobs. And in case you don't know what a temp job is, there are temp agencies, which is short for temporary, and they basically hire people for temporary short-term jobs, usually somewhere between, you know, just a couple to maybe 6 months or so, and then the job is done. And where JD lives, he says that back in the 90s, there was a big surge in the temp agencies back then. And he thinks it's because of some of the reasons that this article outlines, which the biggest one is the economic uncertainty and the economy taking a nosedive. But here's some of the reasons that these temporary agencies are kind of like having a resurgence right now. The first one is because of skill shortages. So businesses are looking for short-term fixes when it comes to that. A lot of businesses are having a hard time hiring the talent they need, and sometimes they don't need that person forever. They just might need them temporarily, hence the temp agency. And in fact, 59% of employers right now are facing difficulties filling vacancies, and it's even higher for companies with over 1,000 employees, with 74% of those companies experiencing recruitment challenges right now. So they turn to temp agencies to be able to fill positions that they need for a few months for highly talented individuals. And it saves them money because they don't have to pay them for full-time wage for an entire year, just a few months, and then they're done. In fact, to show you how big of a resurgence there has been with the temp agencies, there has been a 69% increase in hiring of temporary workers recently. And that shows you that employers are looking for any way they can to cut costs, and this is one of them right now. And that leads to the second point that JD pointed out here to me, which is the economic uncertainty. Right now you have rising business costs, there's increased taxes, there's employment law changes, and there are many businesses and hiring managers that are hesitant to make permanent hiring decisions due to budget limitations. And we also have the tariffs, which we'll talk about in a little while, that greatly impacts decisions that businesses can or cannot make. A recent survey from KPMG found out that employer confidence in hiring is at its weakest level since August of 2020. When we were in the depths of the pandemic, people are feeling just as bad about hiring new employees right now as they did back then. What does that tell you about the state of our economy? And it's also kind of interesting because you have a lot of these companies that are having a hard time recruiting the talent they need, but at the same time, the job vacancies and the job openings have been dwindling. So there's this huge disconnect right now, and I think the job market is completely broken. From everything that people have told me and different reports that I've made here on the channel, it seems like people have to apply to hundreds, sometimes even thousands of jobs online. A lot of the listings are old, expired, even fake sometimes. A lot of these companies just use them to harvest your data as well. And there's not a lot of confidence when it comes to applying and getting a job in 2025 online. But we're talking about full-time jobs here that are hard to get. When it comes to these temporary part-time jobs, that's an entirely different story. There's a big uptick in this right now, and it saves these companies a ton of money. And of course, there's the rise of AI that's making this temporary hiring even easier because they're using AI to streamline the recruitment process and making it easier and quicker for businesses to identify and employ the proper talent. You can take 1,000 applications and run it through AI, and it can just whittle it down to, the top 10 contenders within minutes. And then there's also the rise in hybrid work and the flexibility for employees. And there's actually demand for more flexible work arrangements right now. 46% of professionals say that they would decline job offers that do not include hybrid work options. So more and more people are actually looking for these temporary, low commitment type of jobs because they want that flexibility in their lifestyle. And who could blame them? I mean, that's one of the best things. If you can get it, if you can have freedom and flexibility in your work and still make a good living, you got it made. But like I promised earlier, I want to talk about the tariffs and how this is affecting businesses and everyday Americans already right now, because people are already starting to feel the pressure from the tariffs and are starting to see the price increases. And this is pretty much going to show you why this was never a good idea to begin with, guys, once you see how much money people are spending on things that they didn't have to spend before. Right now there's a tax on auto parts that kicked in this month. Also, there's new duties on steel and aluminum. Also, new levies on small value packages. And there's 10% on most imports. And there's a flat 145% customs fee on anything from China now. And there's potentially more coming down the pipeline. But a lot of the tariffs that were supposed to be in effect now are paused until July of this year. So here's a real world example of how much extra certain items can cost with the tariffs. Here's a woman that needed a new wheelchair. Somebody who's in a wheelchair or needs one. She bought her old wheelchair 10 years ago and it's starting to break down, so she needed a new one. And of course it's made in China. And she said she cannot find an equivalent that is made here in the US, so she has to order it from there. And so she found a company that would ship it to her, and she lives here in Tampa, Florida. So she placed the order in early March, and she found out she would have to pay 20% tariffs on the wheelchair. But the thing is, the wheelchair first had to get imported into Canada and then come to the United States. So at first it came from China to Canada, and then from Canada to the US. And by the time it actually arrived in Canada, there were new tariffs imposed by then for goods crossing over from Canada to the US, plus the China tariff was bumped up to 145%. So by the time she actually got the wheelchair, the total cost of the wheelchair was almost $6,000, and about $3,500 of that $6,000 was due to the tariffs, guys. So this wheelchair would have cost her like $2,500 just a few months ago, and now it's $6,000. Think about that for a little bit. $2,500 is already a lot of money to pay for a wheelchair, and now that's $6,000, people are gonna be financing this stuff. Then you have other small businesses that are taking a hit with these tariffs, and they're actually displaying on their websites how much extra things are costing due to the tariffs and what it cost before the tariff, which I think is smart because it opens up people's eyes to see that this probably isn't a good idea, and it shows you proof that, despite what everybody's saying, these other countries don't pay the tariffs. We pay the tariffs. How much of it we pay kind of depends on how much of the tariff the business owner is willing to absorb and the suppliers are willing to absorb. There's a company out of Colorado called Hive Tech Solutions. They make large refrigerated container boxes for beekeepers and for farmers to keep their harvest fresh. And they already work on slim margins, they say, but now they are going to be working on even slimmer margins. Take a look at this screenshot right here. This shows you the price of one of the company's boxes that used to cost $17,800 and now is $30,000 because it comes from China. They had another box here that used to cost $19,800 and today costs $32,000 because of the tariffs. And actually, Amazon was considering doing the same thing and showing the extra costs on their website due to the tariffs, but now, after getting blasted by the Trump administration for saying that they're going to do it, they decided to back off on that idea and they're not going to anymore. But I think that's a mistake. I think Amazon should display how much it's costing Americans so that way they know, hey, this price increase is coming directly because of the tariff situation. And listen, I wouldn't be against the tariffs if they would eliminate income taxes, because that's how things used to work, right? Prior to 1913, the United States had no income taxes and we ran on tariffs. And the reason why that was happening and the reason why it was possible is because back then we had an extremely small government. There was no welfare, there was no Social Security, there was no Medicaid, none of this crap existed. But now we have so much bloat in our government and it costs a fortune to operate, and somebody has to pay for it. They take our income taxes. And so now we're just going to have tariffs and income taxes, which is just another tax on Americans. So how anybody feels like that's a good idea, I don't know. But there's been a lot of misinformation out there saying, oh, look, China's going to pay these tariffs. And you can see right from this previous example that China's not paying the tariffs for the wheelchair. They're not paying the tariffs for these refrigerated boxes. Business owners and end consumers are paying the tariffs. There's a grocery store in New York that started posting notices around the store on different items that were imported, like bananas from Costa Rica, for example, are going up 10% because of the 10% tariff. So the grocery store is showing some transparent pricing, like here's the reason why this is costing you more. And I think it's better to do it like that, because if you just kind of blindside customers and raise the price on things and people have no idea why they're paying more or what they're paying extra for, then they can kind of blame the retailer and think that it's their fault. They're just raising prices to be greedy. This is more greedflation, and that's why the prices are going up. But if they can actually show proof, like, hey, there's a tariff on this item and that's why you're paying more, then they can understand that it's the fault of the government and not the retailer. Not saying retailers or angels are innocent and they didn't take part in the greedflation. They absolutely did. But in this situation, it's definitely a government problem. And of course, these tariffs are hurting business owners as well. They talked to one small business owner here who says that his profit went from 30% to 16% in a matter of days, who runs a comic business in Ohio. And that's because the Chinese manufacturer who makes his collector figurines is absorbing most of the cost of the tariffs, but not all of it. That's an example right there of, yeah, in some cases, manufacturers and suppliers are actually absorbing some of that tariff. And if they absorb enough of it, then retailers might be able to keep prices stable on certain items. But this guy says what he's doing is he's chosen to absorb about 2/3 of his part of the tariff, and then the rest he's passing along to customers. So he's basically charging his customers 6% more than before after taking a cut in profits. Can you imagine being a business that needs to raise the prices on your customers for something that nobody actually needs? We're talking collectible figurines here, okay? This is a hobby 100%. No one needs that in this economy. And then you are forced to charge more at the same time your profits are going down. I mean, that's kind of like the kiss of death for any business, if you ask me. They also publish comic books that are printed in Canada, which could be facing more tariffs from the US. And now they're looking at alternatives for printing and manufacturing. And he said he would need months, if not even years, for suppliers to explore relocating to the US. And that's also one of the problems with the tariffs, is the idea is that it's supposed to bring more manufacturing back to the US, right? It's like an incentive to make things here. But think about it. It takes many years to bring manufacturing back and to build a factory of any kind, right? And then you actually have to get lazy Americans to work at these jobs who don't want to work. And you're going to have to pay them enough money so that way they can actually afford to buy the products that they're actually making there. So what do you think that's actually going to do to those products and the prices in the end? It's going to go even higher. So I'm all for bringing jobs to America, guys. I love this country, okay? And I want us to succeed. But I think that the way that they're going about it right now is probably going to do more harm than good. It's very soon. It might be too soon to tell. I said I wasn't going to talk about the tariffs until we had some real world examples of how this was impacting people. And now we're finally starting to see some of those real world implications. And as I continue to see them, I'm going to continue sharing it with you guys so people are aware of how much this is hitting everybody at a time when things are already way too expensive and life is unaffordable. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.